You know, once an old British guy said, "I can prove anything by statistics except the truth." His name was George Canning. I don't know a lot about him except I learned in college in my statistics class that he said that. And I find it to be a pretty true statement. You can take statistics and numbers and arrange them to say pretty much anything you want if you work with them enough. By the way, I don't recommend taking statistics in college unless you're in a degree track that forces you to have to take statistics in college. It is not an enjoyable class. Another great quote on statistics that I particularly enjoy and really agree with is that 83% of all statistics are completely made up. Barney Stinson. The thing about statistics, though, is that the numbers have to come from somewhere true. So while the numbers might be accurate, without the proper context or explanation for where they come from, that's where you get into your we can make them say whatever we want. And I stumbled upon a video on YouTube the other day that I thought sounded a little weird, but I wanted to check it out. And while watching it, I realized, yeah, the old statistics game at work. Sure, you can make these numbers say what you want and make a really compelling video, but if you have the context along with it to explain what they're talking about with these particular aircraft and these kill-loss ratios, it doesn't paint exactly the same picture. And I want to, like I said, not dispute the facts or the numbers contained within the video, but I want to put some of it in context. And in that context, I want to look at it again and say, is it the dramatic video they're trying to make it out? To me, they're trying to paint these aircraft in a very negative light. And again, some of them are. Some of them are very negative. They're bad aircraft. They are not good combat aircraft. But in some of the cases, are they really comparing apples to oranges in this? And I think as we go through this, you'll see what I mean. So please take your seats in the briefing room. Grab your Squadron Stein or favorite drinking device container. Grab yourself a drink if you so choose, and let's get on with this and take a look at this video and talk our way through it in a coherent, context-filled military manner and reevaluate this video and see where we end up with it.
Combat jets with low kill-to-loss ratios have often raised questions about their performance and effectiveness in aerial combat. These aircraft, often the subject of scrutiny and debate, have faced challenges and setbacks that have resulted in a seemingly unfavorable ratio of victories to losses. Let's check out the 6 fighters with lowest kill-to-loss ratios in an air-to-air combat. In this list, we will not count World War II fighters, so let's get to it.
So watching the intro, I'm curious, why aren't we talking about World War II fighters? Just out of curiosity. Again, I think it would have changed their ranking here, or they wouldn't have mentioned we're not going to discuss World War II fighters. But one of the things that is important, and they hinted at it, I believe, the narrator, she sort of said at it, is that the situation, you know, that you put your combat aircraft in matters. A combat aircraft is a very wide-ranging designation. Technically, the A-10 is a combat aircraft. The A-10 Thunderbolt II, commonly known as the Warthog, okay? But would we expect it to have a high kill-to-loss ratio in air-to-air combat? Absolutely not. It is not an air combat platform. In the right scenario, when all the stars align and that pilot finds himself in an incredibly advantageous position due to whatever, I'm not going to go through all the variables that go into it, it might come out on top in an air-to-air engagement. But that's not what the platform was designed for. That's not the tactics that pilots exercise they do actually practice air-to-air combat. But again, the envelope for that is very small compared to, say, an F-15, an F-22, and F-16. In an all-out air-to-air combat environment, we would not say the A-10 is a failure because it doesn't have a high kill-to-loss ratio in air-to-air combat. We would say, damn, some fool put the A-10 in an environment it was not designed for, and of course it didn't come out on top. That's context. That's what I'm talking about. And a lot of times people make these videos and they want your clicks and they want your views, so they give it a title. like this one. And they give you some numbers, which, again, not saying the numbers are wrong. I'm not even challenging their numbers. I will give my input on them a little bit and say, I think this is stupid here, but that's not their numbers. We'll get there. But the context matters when we're talking about this stuff. Okay, let's go.
Number 6. The Northrop F-5. This is a family of U.S. supersonic light fighter which entered service in 1962. It has always been exported to many countries, and one country which has heavily used this fighter in combat is Iran. The Iranian Air Force deployed F-5s extensively, engaging in both air-to-air and air-to-ground missions in the Iran-Iraq War.
Okay, I'm going to pause right here. When we talk about air-to-air and air-to-ground missions in the Iran-Iraq War, many more air-to-ground missions. And in fact, the image I paused it on, if you take a look at that Iranian F-5 and let me know if you can identify any air-to-air armament on that aircraft besides the guns that are in the nose of the plane. And if the answer is 0, you are correct. What many F-5s had, rather than their wingtip launch rails installed, early F-5s, were extra fuel tanks, because the F-5 is a very small aircraft. The F-5 was not a frontline fighter for them. It became a lightweight fighter bomber. Also, side note for you to know, during the Islamic Revolution, they gutted the ranks of what was the Imperial Iranian Air Force's best trained pilots. They literally, anybody that might have had any loyalty to the old regime, they simply lined them up and executed them. That meant that all of their best pilots, their most well-trained pilots, they simply arrested them and executed most of them. Some of them they were able to take out of jail before execution and say, we now are fighting a war with Iran. Remember, this was a year after. And they find themselves with, virtually, literally a decimated corps of pilots, very inexperienced lieutenants, or the pilots that basically showed the least amount of promise and were never promoted up through the ranks. Some of their few experienced pilots that had not been executed were taken out of jail and said, basically, this is your only opportunity, fly for us or else. So you have an Air Force now where all of your experienced personnel, including maintenance personnel, are gone. You have an Air Force that has not been flown, not been maintained, because, again, the people have been locked up and executed, and the Air Force has not been utilized, and so idle machinery doesn't do well. And then you have your third string fighters that are really relegated to fighter bomber roles in the air, many of which are carrying extra fuel tanks rather than air-to-air missiles to strike deeper into Iraqi territory. I'm trying to set the stage. I'm trying to give you the context of how the Iranians flew this F-5 as they talk about its terrible loss to kill ratio in the war with Iraq. Now, that's not to say they all did that. They did fly some on short-range combat air patrols. But, again, stand by.
These fighter jets from Iran encountered aerial opposition from Iraqi forces equipped with Mikoyan Gurevich MiG-21s, MiG-23s, MiG-25s, Su-20-22s, Mirage F-1s, and Super Étendards.
So some of the aircraft they named there, the MiG-23, I don't respect the MiG-23 as an air combat fighter, but the MiG-23 has a huge, significant beyond visual range advantage against the F-5, no matter what model you're flying. It's like, it's David and Goliath, and David doesn't have a slingshot to use. The Mirage F-1, that's like a whole different class of fighter versus an F-5. Especially an older F-5 with a radar that probably doesn't work and no air-to-air weaponry on it whatsoever. Just, again, context. The idea is, we're not talking about equal pilots and equal aircraft going up and dogfighting and the airplane just sucks. There's a lot that goes into it.
There were claims suggesting that an IRIAF F-5E successfully downed a MiG-25 on August 6, 1983, though Russian sources attribute the first confirmed MiG-25 kill to 1985.
There are Western intelligence agencies that have confirmed that kill, by the way, which is awesome. And maybe we'll do a whole video on that, because that is David and Goliath. But there's also a lot that went into that. That is not just context. There's a lot of variables that went into that for another time.
It has also engaged in many other battles, of which it was claimed that there are 25 combat victories while suffering 25 losses to enemy aircraft, resulting in 1:1 ratio.
So, when we talk about the losses to victories, we're talking about a span of a couple decades. We're talking about using aircraft for roles other than intended. We're talking about pilot training. We're talking about using the aircraft up against platforms that they had no hope against fighting. We're talking about using them in dynamic scenarios where they probably were not the appropriate aircraft to use in the first place. So again, I'm not debating the numbers. I'm not saying their numbers are wrong. I'm not saying it's fake. I'm not saying that they made it up. I'm just saying a lot of context is necessary, and a little context goes a long way when we just throw these numbers out there to understand, is it a bad airplane? Is it a failure of an airplane? Or is there more to look into?
At number 5, the Mikoyan Gurevich MiG-25. A high-speed interceptor and reconnaissance aircraft of Soviet origin, it is renowned for its exceptional speed and has seen active service in numerous conflicts. Notably in Syria on February 13, 1981, an Israeli F-15 successfully downed a MiG-25 using AIM-7F Sparrow missiles.
First of all, I cannot stand people that don't do enough research to know we don't pronounce AIM. We pronounce them AIM, Air Intercept Missile, but it's just pet peeve. We call them AIM 7s, AIM 9s, AIM 120s. AIM, no. So again, context here. And I can't believe I'm going to bat for the MiG-25, but she said it in the first place. The MiG-25, and I talked about this again in the Fulcrum flanker video. MiG-25 is a straight interceptor. It is not designed for air-to-air combat. Now, when I talk about air-to-air combat, I'm talking about my fighter plane versus your fighter plane. An interceptor flying at short bursts, renowned for its high speed. Okay, short burst at Mach 2.8, firing a beyond visual range missile at a bomber-sized target. Is that air-to-air combat? Technically, yeah. But that's not what we think of. When you, viewer, think about air-to-air combat, I almost guarantee you're thinking about a scene from Top Gun or Iron Eagle, where 2, 4, 6, 8 fighter planes are doing this and shoot missiles at each other. And that's not what the MiG-25 was designed for. That's not what the MiG-25 did. And that's not what the MiG-25 was any good at all. And quite frankly, only a fool would engage a MiG-25 in that activity. And anytime a MiG-25 was engaged in that activity, universally it failed. That's not to say they didn't get a few kills, but that MiG-25 usually died during the activity of getting those kills.
A similar encounter occurred on July 29, 1981, when an Israeli F-15A once again brought down a Syrian MiG-25. During the Persian Gulf War, a US Navy F-A-18 fell victim to a missile fired by MiG-25.
And again, a lot of content. That is true, and that is how we lost Spiker, Lieutenant Commander Spiker, and that was a big deal, and I'm not going to go into that further, but there was a lot of confusion at play in that first night of Operation Desert Storm, and that MiG-25 didn't make it home that night either. That was back in the day where you didn't just have a 4-ship of airplanes going after a target, or even a 2-ship. You had an entire strike package. Taking anything away from that Foxbat pilot, you know, he managed to get a shot off at an entire Navy strike package, but he also didn't make it home to see his family that night. And again, a lot of stuff that went into that, and back and forth, and that MiG-25 should have been shot earlier, but there was anyway. That's a whole nother that's a whole nother story.
Concurrently, 2 Iraqi MiG-25s met their demise at the hands of U.S. Air Force F-15s courtesy of AIM-7 Sparrow missiles on January 19, 1991.
You show
Notably,
hands up?
in 1986, amid a Syrian-Iraqi border violation incident, a MiG-25 secured 1 enemy aircraft kill without suffering any losses. In the Iran-Iraq War, the MiG-25 boasted 5 enemy aircraft kills while enduring only 1 loss.
Okay, I just gotta stop here, because what is that? Did whoever's making this video look at that F-15 and say, that looks right? I think what they did here is they had the MiG going one way, and they said, we need this to be the antagonist. Just flipped the picture around and didn't bother to notice that the entire tail code was facing the wrong way. What this has to do with Iraqis or whatever,
However, during the Soviet-Iranian border violations in 1986 and 1987, 2 MiG-25s were shot down without achieving any kills. Altogether, these encounters collectively yield a 1:1 ratio in air-to-air combat engagements.
So once again, the magic context word. We have a high-altitude, high-speed interceptor, not designed in any way, shape, or form for air-to-air, head-to-head combat. It is a terrible turning aircraft. It does not have a reliable short-range air-to-air radar. Pilots are not trained to make their own in-the-cockpit decisions regarding air combat. It typically does not carry any within visual range weapons. And I'll say one more time, it was never designed to engage a fighter-sized target. It is designed to intercept bombers and high-speed reconnaissance aircraft. So, do the numbers in the video lie? No, not at all. But is it really a logical or fair comparison of any of those numbers, to even wonder about the combat capability head-to-head of the MiG-25 and the F-15? It really makes no sense. None. So, there we go. I can't believe I'm sticking up for the MiG-25. What has happened on this earth where I am taken up for the Foxbat?
At number 4, the Lockheed F-104 Starfighter, an American single-engine supersonic fighter aircraft renowned for its air superiority capabilities, saw extensive use as a fighter bomber during the Cold War era. In a notable incident, during the Vietnam War in September 20, 1965, 3 F-104s met their demise when their pilots inadvertently entered Chinese airspace, resulting in their downing by Chinese Shenyang J-6 aircraft. Interestingly, the F-104 recorded no air-to-air kills during its involvement in the Vietnam conflict. The F-104 starfighters also served in the Pakistani Air Force, where during the 1965 war, 2 of the 14 aircraft were officially lost. Subsequently, 4 F-104s were lost during the 1971 Indo-Pak War. Furthermore, the F-104 took part in various other conflicts and crises, including the 1967 Taiwan Strait conflict, Ran of Kutch conflict, Berlin crisis of 1961, and Taiwan Strait crisis. When considering all these engagements together, the combined kill-to-loss ratio for the F-104 is approximately 1:2.
Okay, I just let that one play in its entirety. You notice I made no commentary because you know what? They called this one correctly. The F-104, while looked back with rose-colored glasses in Air Force history, was a failure as a fighter plane. It really was. Kelly Johnson, the chief designer, head designer for Lockheed, I almost said Lockheed Martin, for Lockheed back in the day, and involved in some of the most famous Lockheed Skunk Works projects, the U-2, the SR-71, and going all the way back to the P-38 Lightning back in World War II. This was a swing and a miss. There were tremendous problems with the F-104 throughout its entire career. And in fact, the Air Force, I'm going to try to keep this one short, ended up cutting its orders dramatically. The Lockheed actually kept one of its own just to try to fly around to various air shows and everything to try to sell it on and the one thing they made a mistake was where they said it was renowned for its air superiority capability. It absolutely was not renowned for any air combat capability. It was a turkey of an air-to-air fighter. NATO and our other allies bought this because it was available, it was fast, and it could go relatively high. It could be sort of an interceptor, but most of NATO used the G model as a fighter bomber. It was not a very good dogfighter, really. It was not a good air superiority fighter, really. And it was it failed in really all of its milestone goals. It was not a good fighter. It just wasn't. And we look back on it because it's part of the Century series. So all of the F-100s, F-100, F-101, F-102, the F-104, the F-105, the F-106. We look upon these as like the 1950s, 60s era of, oh, we love them, like our, golden oldies. But the F-104 was not a good fighter. So, sorry, I've said that enough. They called this one correct. Except for that part about saying it was renowned for its air superiority. It wasn't. It just wasn't. That's why they didn't fill the skies of Vietnam with them. They flew very isolated. They were right. It did not get a single air-to-air kill in Vietnam because they only used them in the most isolated kind of, I won't even, well, yeah, combat air patrol, I guess, is the right phrase, but basically they flew to watch the border. I mean, they did not fly to, they didn't do much. I guess they did escort a couple missions here and there, but nobody had much faith in their ability to tangle with anything that the North Vietnamese were sending. So, okay, moving on.
At number 3, the Mikoyan Gurevich MiG-21, a supersonic fighter and interceptor aircraft designed by Soviet Union's Mikoyan Gurevich Design Bureau, has seen extensive service across approximately 16 countries spanning 4 continents. This aircraft has been at the forefront of numerous battles worldwide. The 1971 Indo-Pak War witnessed the first supersonic air combat in the subcontinent when an Indian MiG-21FL claimed the PAF F-104A Starfighter. By the time the hostilities came to an end, the IAF MiG-21FLs had claimed 4 PAF F-104As, 2 PAF Shenyang F-6, 1 PAF North American F-86 Sabre, and 1 PAF Lockheed C-130 Hercules.
Okay, pause. Technically, a pilot is credited with a kill for shooting down a C-130. A C-130 is a transport plane. It is big, it is slow, it has no armament. I'm not talking about the AC-130 gunship, but even that, you can't shoot anything at an airplane. Should that even count? This is just an opinion question. Should that even count towards a kill-loss ratio? Should that even count to a pilot's kill count? Or should that be chalked up more like as if they had blown up a target on the ground? I'm just asking the question. Because that is like picking on a defenseless kid at a playground. There's no, that should, to me, that shouldn't even count as an air-to-air kill, but, it is. What I wanted to say also is that they're talking a lot about the Indian Air Force's experience with the MiG-21. The Indian Air Force has a very extensive history of the MiG-21, and as a matter of fact, one of the last users of the MiG-21, they had developed, in cooperation with Russia, a frighteningly effective and capable variant called the MiG-21 Bison. Now, when I was stationed at Mountain Home Air Force Base in Idaho, we would, I can't remember, I think it was biannually, we would host the Indian Air Force, and they would come over, and it was a big deal for everybody because we got to see aircraft we didn't normally see, and work with them, and they were very secretive. They wouldn't let anybody near the aircraft on the ground, but they would bring their Su-30 MKI flankers, which, I mean, to see one parked down the flight line from an F-15, were huge and quiet when they came into land. And one year they brought the MiG-21 Bison, and the MiG-21 was just a little tiny death machine wrapped up in MiG-21 clothing, the Bison. It was so upgraded, it could use weapons that no other MiG-21 ever could, and the Indian pilots are good, they train, they spend the money on maintenance. Little let down in their controller procedures. And we're going to talk about command and control in a following video, and why the most important weapon system any Air Force can invest in is command and control. But their pilots are good. They're very good. And their maintainers are very proud of their aircraft and keep them in remarkable shape. And those late model Indian MiG-21 Bisons could go toe-to-toe with a lot of fourth generation modern aircraft. Just gonna leave it at that.
In Vietnam, the MiG-21 was credited with 78 enemy aircraft kills, but suffered 95 losses. The 1967-68 war witnessed Egypt's significant loss of around 100 out of its 110 MiG-21s, out of which were on the ground, while Syria lost 35 of its 60 MiG-21 F-13s and MiG-21 PFs in aerial and ground engagement.
So here's another thing. Again, the numbers are not wrong. They're not lying about the numbers, but they're counting aircraft blown up on the ground. Does that count in a kill-loss ratio? And what they're talking about, and here is the Israelis fighting against the Arab coalitions twice. Should we really be counting into these statistics aircraft that were hit on the ground before they even got a chance to come up and fight that day? Does that count as an air combat loss? So the numbers are not lies. Yes, these MiG-21s were killed by another airplane. But they were not fighting those airplanes. They were sitting on the ground on a tarmac somewhere. More context for you. Should that count against the MiG-21? Another factor we need to look at when we're talking about these specifically, and we're talking about Arab-Israeli conflicts, and this is not to put anybody's military down, but there was a significant difference in pilot training, and there still is today, with the Israeli Air Force and almost any other Air Force. The Israeli Air Force trains harder than almost any other Air Force in the world. And then the difference in the pilot skills and capabilities of the Israeli Air Force versus anyone else was huge. So are we looking at a failure of the aircraft? Because she said that in the beginning, talking about the failures of aircraft. Is it a failure of the MiG-21? Or is it a failure of the pilot training of the men in the cockpit of the MiG-21? There's a lot to look at. So sometimes air combat isn't necessarily about the airplane, it's about the people flying the airplane. And these are important details because the numbers are still there. The numbers are accurate. We're not debating them. We're talking about the context behind the numbers and how realistic are the statistics they are using when we're watching these videos and evaluating, is that airplane good? Is it bad? Is this Air Force good? Is it bad? We want to get an accurate weapons and tactics view at what they're presenting us.
Between the end of the Six-Day War and the War of Attrition, IAF Mirage fighters secured 6 confirmed kills against Egyptian MiG-21s, where Egyptian MiG-21 scored 2 confirmed kills. During the Yom Kippur War, Israel claimed 73 kills against Egyptian MiG-21s, with 65 confirmed victories. Egypt, on the other hand, asserted 27 confirmed kills against Israeli aircraft using their MiG-21s. In the Iran-Iraq War, Iranian F-14s brought down 23 Iraqi MiG-21s, and another 29 Iraqi MiG-21s were downed by F-4s. However, from 1980 to 1988, Iraqi 21s achieved 43 victories against Iranian fighter aircraft. Across various other conflicts and engagements, when combined, the MiG-21 accumulated a total of 240 kills but suffered 501 losses. This results in an approximate ratio of 1:2.1 in terms of kills to losses. At number 2, the Mikoyan MiG-29. A twin-engine fighter aircraft originating from the Soviet Union and introduced into service in 1983.
I can't tell you how happy I was to see that MiG-29 on the list. Not because I harbor ill will towards the MiG-29, but after I just put up that video explaining why the MiG-29 basically sucks compared to other planes, I took that as confirmation. But, sorry, go on.
It has seen active combat engagements in several conflicts. Notably, during the 1991 Persian Gulf War, the Iraqi Air Force deployed MiG-29s, resulting in 5 of them being shot down by USAF F-15s. However, the MiG-29 did not achieve any kills during this conflict. In subsequent engagements such as the Kosovo War in Serbia, 6 MiG-29s were downed, with 3 by USAF F-15s, 1 by a USAF F-16, and 1 by a Royal Netherlands Air Force F-16.
Alright, so we're gonna go back to, if you haven't watched the MiG-29 versus Su-27 30-35 flanker video, I encourage you to do so. It really gets in depth with the MiG-29 and the flanker and kind of what makes them different and what I identified as some of the big drawbacks of the MiG-29. But with that video in mind, here we go again, talking about putting the MiG-29 up against and in a situation where it just was not designed to handle. The MiG-29 cannot, especially in untrained, improficient hands like the Iraqi Air Force. And at that point, the Iraqi Air Force was drained from 10 years of fighting against Iran. It cannot go up against a highly professional, technologically proficient, and superior fighting force like the US, the British, or other NATO allies in their superior 4th generation fighters. It's so outclassed. And again, Iraq was flying early model MiG-29As. It just did not have a chance. Even some of the best pilots on their best days in an early MiG-29A would have little to no chance against an F-15C fully equipped. In the Balkans, same thing. Very early MiG-29As. Now today, they have upgraded like the Slovakian MiG-29AS, but even then, we talked about before, just minor cockpit upgrades, no great across the spectrum like avionics upgrades, just operator interface and minor things like radios and GPS, but the MiG-29 is very lacking. It is a great maneuvering platform. The airframe is great and in the hands of a well-trained, very tactically proficient pilot, can handle itself in a dogfight very well. The whole point is never let it get in that position, and that is what an experienced, well-trained Western 4th generation or 5th generation fighter pilot is going to do. It's going to take you out before you ever get a chance to get in your element to dogfight. And so that's what we saw when the MiG-29 came up to fight every single time.
Once again, the MiG-29 did not record any kills in this theater. During the Lebanon War, 2 Israeli F-15Cs reportedly downed 2 MiG-29As on June 2, 1989. Another instance of MiG-29 action occurred on February 24, 1996, when 2 brothers to the rescued Cessna 337 Sky Masters were shot down by a Cuban Air Force Mikoyan MiG-29UB.
I'm going to stop again. So you got a MiG-29, a 4th generation fighter shooting down a Cessna Super Skymaster. No air-to-air armament. It's a civilian plane. There was a military version called the O-2A. It's again, still the military version. No air-to-air armament. Can run away from you at a whole 200 knots to your nearly Mach 2. Is this even a creditable kill? I don't get, yes, it is. Technically it is. It is. They can count it as a kill. But if this is what the MiG-29 has to rack up as an air-to-air kill, I will note that it was a MiG-29UB, and again, referencing our last video with the MiG-29s, the MiG-29UB has no radar. So that's pretty good that the pilots had to follow ground control intercept controller's direction and then visually acquire that plane. But that's just wrong. That is just wrong.
In the Ethiopian-Eritrean War, MiG-29 achieved 3 enemy aircraft kills, but suffered 5 losses. Lastly, during the 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine, Su-27s and MiG-27s were deployed as air superiority fighters.
No. I call BS on that. I don't know what they meant to say. There's no way in any Air Force, in any country in the world, that a MiG-27 was deployed as an air superiority fighter. Absolutely not. Su-27s, absolutely. The MiG-27 is an offshoot of the MiG-23. It's a modification of the MiG-23 where they chop off the nose, they make some modifications to the engine, they armor up the cockpit, and they take the radar away and they give it a laser rangefinder and a kind of looks like a duckbill platypus nose, which gives the pilot a better forward and downward view. It is now strictly an air-to-ground platform. It can only carry the smallest, the R-60, the AA-8 AFID, close-in air defense missiles. There is absolutely no way anybody deployed a MiG-27 for air superiority or air defense. I'm not sure what mistake they made on that video or what they meant to say, but that is untrue and wrong. And I'd love to know what they meant.
But 10 MiG-29s were reported lost both on the ground and in the air. So in total, it got 6 kills while suffered 18 losses, which is 1:3 ratio in air-to-air combat. The aircraft with the lowest kill-to-loss ratio is the Mikoyan Yurovich MiG-23, a versatile variable geometry fighter aircraft designed by the Soviet Union's Mikoyan Yurovich Design Bureau. It has a history marked by various conflicts. During the Soviet-Afghan War, there were sporadic clashes between Soviet MiG-23s and Pakistani F-16s in 1987, resulting in the downing of 2 MiG-23s when they crossed the border. Conversely, on April 29, 1987, one F-16 was shot down.
This kind of stuff kills me because just the lack of accuracy in fact-checking. This is a picture of an F-16 from Luke Air Force Base that suffered catastrophic damage, and this is at Gila Bend Airfield. This is an F-16 that went down in training. This is not, so it landed and suffered all kind of emergency landing, and then basically runway incursion and hilarity ensued. I shouldn't say it so cavalier, but everybody walked away okay. But this is not a shot down aircraft. It's not even a foreign aircraft. It wears the tail markings of Luke Air Force Base, where prior to very recently, every F-16 operator in the United States Air Force went to get trained to fly. Some now are at Holloman. Now they've introduced the F-35 program, and they've split training for F-16s and F-35s up. Foreign F-16 users are trained also in Arizona, but at another base. Anyway, well, some Taiwanese and Singaporean F-16 pilots are trained at Luke as well. 21st Fighter Squadron for Taiwan and the 425th Fighter Squadron for Singapore. Anyway, it takes 2 seconds to fact check your picture and not put it in like this. I don't get it.
In the Iran-Iraq War from 1980 to 1988, the MiG-23 incurred significant losses, with Iraq officially reporting 38 MiG-23s lost. In return, Iraqi MiG-23 pilots claimed approximately 20 aerial victories, 7 of which were later confirmed after cross-referencing with Iranian sources.
I love that they claimed 23 victories and they were able to confirm 7. Then again, that's nothing new. Pilots, since pilots were pilots, have been claiming more victories than they actually got. Whether it's just untrue lies, and yeah, some pilots have just claimed victories they didn't get, and that's the way it is. Or, sometimes you see a smoke puff out on the horizon and you say, oh, I think I killed that guy. And, it gets reported as a kill until it's either confirmed or not. There are still what we call unconfirmed kills. Pilot reports it, or someone says, hey, there was, I know I heard somebody call Fox 2 on the radio, and then I saw a smoke puff. But nobody can confirm there was an actual aircraft down in that area. It happens, but it's just kind of funny that there's such a dramatic 23 claimed kills versus 7 confirmed. That is a huge discrepancy.
During the 1982 Lebanon War, the MiG-23 also suffered substantial losses, with the Israeli Air Force downing around 30 MiG-23 aircraft. Israel officially acknowledges only one loss, a BQM-34 Firebee downed by a Syrian MiG-23MF on June 6, 1982. The MiG-23 has participated in other conflicts as well, resulting in a combined tally of 25 kills and 102 losses, culminating in an air-to-air combat ratio of approximately 1:4. And that's it for today. Stay tuned for more videos from The Buzz.
I really can't argue with this one either. I mean, the MiG-23 is a terrible fighter plane. You're talking about a plane that not only is terrible in combat, but has racked up a record of about 20 and a half aircraft losses per 1,000 operating hours across the world anyway. What that means is they lose 20, almost 21 airplanes for every 1,000 hours, and that's throughout all the fleet just from flying it. They just crash. They just lose them. Now, I know somebody's going to say, oh, other planes crash too. I recognize that. Not at the volume at which MiG-23s have just fall out of the sky. And it is because it is a very hard airplane to fly, because it was designed terribly. The MiG-23 is a terrible fighter. It's a terrible fighter. As bad a fighter as the F-104 was a fighter. And so to see it at the top of this list, I'm not at all surprised. I will say, again, a lot of it though, if you look, a lot of the countries they talked about were staffed by maybe not the best trained personnel. How would that aircraft had performed in the hands of, in its heyday, a properly trained, well-equipped, well-funded Soviet Air Force? We'll never really know. But we have seen exactly how it performs in the hands of pilots from air forces that haven't been given the right funding, that haven't been properly trained, whose pilots don't fly nearly enough hours as they should, and who are not as versed in air-to-air combat as the adversaries they fly against. So overall, was the video terrible? No, it wasn't, actually. It presented some factual information. As I've used this C word over and over and over, though, a little bit of context goes a long way, not just in this video, but when you watch all of these videos on YouTube that are put together by folks that are very good at researching things, but don't have a background in tactics, who don't really understand what they're talking about. They just know the numbers that they're presenting to you. So I hope that anybody that's watching my channel anyway will watch these things with a critical eye, listen with a critical ear, and then maybe take the step to do a little research or look into it a little bit further. Because like George Canning said, statistics will tell you whatever they want basically, and the truth lies somewhere in the middle of the actual numbers and the presentation. But the raw numbers themselves are usually never the whole story. I hope that this video was a little bit entertaining and maybe a little bit educational, and maybe you learned something a little bit tactical out of this. If you enjoyed it, consider subscribing, hitting the like button. Turn on your notifications. I'm aiming to do uploads once a week, but editing and everything, I'm not sure that's what we're gonna go for our weekly Friday weapons and tactics talk. I appreciate everybody for taking the time to watch. Remember, just about all the videos on this channel come from questions from people out there who want to know things. So there's an email address in the video description where you can send your questions that I would be more than happy to answer for you. This concludes our weapons and tactics talk. You are released for your day. I hope you enjoy it.